Good evening, and welcome virtually to Roosevelt House here at Hunter College. Tonight, we're coming together from across the country to talk about the importance of voting. Many are calling the upcoming election the most important one ever. In addition to all of the other issues that affect your life every day, democracy itself might be on the ballot. We're here in the former home of Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt, and I want to share with you a few words that Eleanor Roosevelt wrote in 1946. When the American people become apathetic and do not keep the control of their government in their own hands, it is bound to slip into the hands of those who make politics a profession. Therefore, because of their indifference, the American people may sometimes find themselves slaves to representatives who do not really represent them. On two of the issues we're highlighting tonight, gun control and reproductive rights, our elected representatives as a whole do not reflect the majority views of the electorate. There's a disconnect which can only be fixed by voting. In 2020, we saw a significant jump in student voter turnout, 14% higher than 2016. But the turnout was only 66%. That is a record high, but it means that 1 in 3 students is not voting. We need all of your voices to make our democracy work. So tonight, we're hoping to educate, motivate, and inspire you to do whatever you can to get out the vote in the upcoming election on November 8th. We're privileged to have Carol Jenkins with us to lead the conversation tonight, a groundbreaking journalist, a tireless activist, and a lifelong voter. Please welcome Carol Jenkins.
Thanks so much, Jessica. I only started voting when I was 21, I think, even though Jessica likes to think of it as lifelong. I am a voter and an activist, and I am so thrilled to be with you all during this event. It's called Vote for Your Future. It's an online event to bring students across the country together around the importance of voting. There are many issues that particularly affect young people, and the candidates we elect this year to represent us will make decisions that affect your lives, all of our lives. Tonight, we will highlight gun safety and reproductive freedom. Most Americans support reasonable gun control measures that have been stalled for years in Congress, and many recent state laws restricting access to abortion are now coming into force following, of course, the Supreme Court's decision to reverse the right to choose that had been protected by Roe v. Wade. These are two of many issues that students across the country care about. Whatever issues are most important to you, voting is the way to make your voice heard. I want to thank Hunter College and Roosevelt House for organizing this event and introduce Ramy Echeverria, who led the event team. Ramy is a graduate of Hunter College and just finished her master's degree in public policy at Harvard University. Ramy.
Thank you, Carol, for that kind introduction and for kicking us off. We know that voting affects every aspect of our lives. And for many of us, the result of who is in office can completely change our life's trajectory. It determines who has access to clean water, who has access to economic opportunity, who has access to quality education, who has freedom to choose, and who is safe. And safety is the foundation upon which we can build the prosperous, autonomous lives that we deserve. And voting also facilitates other forms of civic engagement. So the activists on the ground today need leaders in office that can ensure that their work is supported and funded and amplified. So before we move forward, I'd like to shout out some of those folks. We'd like to acknowledge our partners for this event. We thank Black Voters Matter, Voto Latino, and Supermajority for working with us and for all of the work that they do every day to mobilize voters. Additionally, we would like to thank the work of Paolani Cortez Villas, who works at Giffords, Kimberly Peeler Allen, who's a practitioner at Rutgers University, and Manu Vugavan, who's professor of history, human rights, and public policy at Hunter College. And lastly, I'd like to introduce, thank, and hand it over to Katrina Avilla, program associate at the Human Rights Program at Roosevelt House, Hunter College, who has been indispensable for putting this event together. Katrina is a graduate of Macaulay Honors College at Hunter.
Thank you, Ramy, and thank you for your amazing work and dedication to this project. Hi, everyone. My name is Katrina Avia, and I'm so glad to be here with you all from all over the country for Vote for Your Future. Tonight, we have campuses participating from Duke University, Howard University, Kentucky State University, Santa Clara University School of Law, Smith College, University of Pennsylvania, Tuskegee University, Cornell University, University of Colorado Boulder, Yale University, and Hunter College. I am a 2020 Macaulay graduate here at Hunter College, so I was in your shoes not too long ago. Many of you might be voting for the first time this election, and it's a special moment. Whether it's your first vote or not, it is at this point in our lives that we finally have the chance to have our voices count in a process that determines the directions of our future. It may not seem like a big deal, but I promise you it is. Life as a student can be stressful, and we get so caught up in the busyness of it all. And voting can be especially confusing for those of us who are maybe casting ballots out of state. But we can't let this crucial moment pass us by. Let's all get registered and let's vote, and let's tell our friends to do it too. So our partner organizations, Black Voters Matter, Supermajority, and Voto Latino, they each have great resources on their websites, which we'll share in the chat to help you all figure out your individual voting plans after this event. I think we can all agree that there are so many issues, some of which you'll hear about tonight in our country and in our communities, that we as young people want to see change. And voting is just one of the first basic steps we must take to make sure that happens. So voting, it's worth it. And with that said, I'll turn it over to Carol.
Thank you so much, Katrina, and to Rami. That was wonderful. We'd like to start with a dialogue about the history and importance of voting, a dialogue between campus students from Howard University, Tuskegee University, and Kentucky State University, and the legendary Ruby Sales. Ruby is a civil rights activist, a scholar, a public theologian. As a teenager, Ruby worked tirelessly in the 1960s to register voters in Alabama when she joined the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or then known as SNCC. Ruby Sales went on to found Spirit House Project, an organization that uses the arts, research, education, action, and spirituality to bring diverse peoples together to work for racial, economic, and social justice, as well as for spiritual maturity. We are so honored to have Ruby with us in dialogue with Grace Jackson, Lena Levette, Amanda Hanna, and Aria Miles.
I'd like to thank everyone for being a part of this incredible conversation that we will have this morning. And I just want to provide a little background about why voting continues to be a very important issue for African Americans. Immediately after the end of the Civil War, and with the passage of the 15th Amendment that gave Black men the right to vote, Black people took seriously that citizenship promise of equality. But in response to Black men's voting, there ensued incredible violence throughout the South, massacres. Between 1866 to 1910, there were 75 massacres of Black communities, and 85% of those massacres occurred around the right to vote. I'm part of a long history of Black people struggling for the right to vote. And the right to vote has to do with asserting our right to shape the direction of this nation, to really have our voices heard in how this country would move forward. And so you, as you are being involved in voting, please understand that you are part of a long project of generations of African Americans who refuse to be intimidated, who suffered through having our right to vote stripped away from us, who took our case to the Supreme Court, finally won in the 1940s the right to participate in primaries, only to have the South not listen, not respect that Supreme Court decision. And then we finally resolved the issue during the Southern Freedom Movement, commonly known as the Civil Rights Movement. So today I want to talk with you about your vision and your understanding of the necessity of voting in the time that we're living in. So I think that probably what we should do from here is that you should introduce yourselves and say a little bit about why you think voting is important, and then we'll have a larger conversation.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lena Levette. I'm a senior
Hi.
public relations major, political science minor at Howard University, and I'm also the current president for Black Girls Vote here at Howard. And to answer your question of why voting is important, I simply believe that, voting is our voice, and it's how we're represented in spaces where we're usually not represented. It's making sure that, we're holding our elected officials accountable to the demands that we seek necessary. And it's just how we, strive forward, like I said earlier, in places that we are very underrepresented. You can't expect everything to be done if your voice isn't out there and if you're not doing your own part as a fellow citizen of this country.
My name is Amanda Hanna, and I'm a senior political science major, African American Studies minor from Harlem, New York. And outside of the classroom, I serve as the secretary of the Howard University chapter of Black Girls Vote. And I believe that voting is important to me because, like Lena said, our vote is our voice. And not only that, I am a Black woman, and I know that many Black women before me have fought to have the right to vote. So I think that it's important to honor those Black women by using our vote as our voice.
Hi, I'm Aria Miles. I am a junior here at Kentucky State University. I'm the current president of the NAACP, and I believe that voting, like they said, is our voice. If we don't speak up, nothing will get done, and we need to educate youth and more people more forward.
Hi, everyone. I'm Grace Jackson. I am a Montgomery, Alabama native, a current junior sales and marketing major at Tuskegee University, where I also serve as the executive SGA vice president. I believe that voting is important because, kind of just to echo what everybody else is saying, it's our voice. But to add another layer onto that, I feel like voting is that one chance that we get as citizens to really tell our representatives how we feel about what they're doing. It's not every day that you don't really get the option to sit and have dialogue with your congressman. You can write letters and things, but that vote is a way for a grand voice to be heard at once, instead of a lot of individual voices.
Okay, so if your voice could be heard and if you had an opportunity to set an agenda based on the power of your vote, what would some of the items on your agenda be and why? In other words, what's on your mind as from your generational perspective? What issues keep you awake at night?
I think that the biggest one for me is educational equity. Growing up in Montgomery, well, I'm not sure if anybody's aware, but we were number 49 on the public school education scale in Alabama. And I believe that that's a very telling of the dynamics of Montgomery. It was, everyone knows it was heavily segregated. And we had a lot of private schools made that took away funding from public schools. So I believe that educational equity would be one of the main things that I would want to address.
For me, I would say putting a real end to voter suppression. As someone who's been very active on Howard's campus with voter registration drives and just making sure that students are aware of the political climate in general, it's been very obvious that a lot of students don't have the right access to voting. This is a lot of students first time voting, and they're not really sure about how the process really works. And for me, I had experienced voter suppression, which is why I got involved with Black Girls Vote. And after sharing my experience, I realized that there are a lot of other students who have similar sentiments here at Howard. And if it's that popular at Howard, then it's probably happening at a lot of other schools. And so people are quick to say that young people don't vote. We're the least likely demographic to vote, but a lot of students just don't have the right tools and knowledge on how to go about voting. And so I would love to put it into voter suppression, specifically for college students.
So for me, as a Harlem native, I believe that This generation faces many issues. However, some of the issues that have been keeping me up at night, as you said before, are the issues of gun violence and the issues of gentrification. We've been seeing a lot of gun violence in our schools. So now we feel like schools are not a safe place. And not only that, outside of schools, we face the threat of gun violence within our community. And I believe that voting can solve that issue by us going out and voting for politicians that care and that will make the necessary gun reforms to make our schools safer and to make our community safer. And as for gentrification, that issue is important because many Black and Brown people are being displaced from communities that they've been in for generations. And voting can solve that issue because, again, we can get politicians in that care to set caps on things like rent prices and to make sure that generations of Black and Brown people are not being pushed out from our communities.
I think one of the problems that our generations are facing is, yes, gun control, but I also feel where I'm close to Louisville, Kentucky. I'm from Richmond, Kentucky. Police brutality is one thing. And if we could get the politicians who actually care, we can get more laws on gun control, more laws on body cams being on 24/7, more laws towards that. It just keeps me up at night because that could be me, one of my friends, my family, one of my colleagues. So it just keeps me up at night that it happens so close, and I really couldn't, just fathom that.
Okay, well, I've asked you a lot of questions. Do you have any questions you'd like to ask me?
I do have a question for you.
Sure, go ahead.
So I've seen your, I guess, exhibit in the Legacy Museum in Montgomery, and read about how you led voting or the voter march in Selma and helped to get Tuskegee students involved in the voter march in Selma. I wanted to know what do you think was the most effective technique that you had, not only in gathering students to be fired up about going to Selma, but also in retaining those same students when y'all got back to Tuskegee to continue advocating?
I think that I would not think that I was gathering students more so than being a part of a movement of students who were themselves being very much involved in the movement. And I think that we've got to rethink how we understand what our roles are. And in SNCC, our role was not to lead people, but more or less to help facilitate the power of people to lead themselves. And so I would think about ways in which we could have civic education classes that really help people to develop the language to speak for themselves and to become stronger participants in democracy. But I wouldn't think of myself as leading anything or being more or less a part of something larger than myself. I'm a part of the community. And so we're joined together by our common history and our common place in American society in relationship to the meaning of Blackness.
So a lot of the times when talking with members of my community, I feel that, they might not trust the government. So therefore they don't feel that it's necessary to engage in the political process. So my question is, what advice would you give to me or other youth for restoring faith back to those who may not trust in the political process to engage in civic engagement again?
I would say all more reasons that you should engage in civic actions because you don't trust the government. Why would you leave your destiny in the hands of people that you don't trust? And so it's precisely because the government has not been very trustworthy that you should engage, that you should make sure that you're there shaping your destiny and that it's an abdication of your love for yourself and the love for your community to leave our destinies in the hands of other people who've proven unworthy. Don't you think that's a bit naive to leave our destinies in the hands of other people whom we don't trust?
I definitely do. I think, like you said, how can we leave our fate in the hands of people we don't trust. The only way that we can get people that we do trust is if we actually vote them in.
To the students that are currently watching this, that are of voting age, I would like to encourage you to become very involved in your civic engagement process as this midterm election approaches. This midterm election is arguably the most important election that we've seen in the past 5 to 10 years. So please come out and vote.
Students who might be watching this, our vote is our voice. It is important that we go out and vote, especially for this election as it is the most important. There are very pertinent issues on the forefront at this election, especially with the Supreme Court and things they are trying to do to restrict the quality of life of members of the LGBTQ community and members of rural areas. Even though they are marginalized, they are very important too, and we must vote to ensure to give a voice to those that are marginalized.
To everyone watching this call, I want to remind you that this year alone, there have been over 400 voter suppression laws trying to get passed alone. With such an evident pushback, it's clear that our right to vote is very precious. And like Amanda said earlier on the call, countless people have fought and paved the way for us to exercise our right to vote. Issues like gun control, education disparities, human rights issues, and et cetera will continue to be issues if we don't vote. And so if we want for things to get better, if we want to see change, if we want for our world to be a reflection of us, you have to do your part and vote.
Vote, vote, vote. Onward for democracy.
Onward for democracy.
For democracy.
Right on.
Right on.
Right on.
All right, that's back in the day, but I thought I'd throw it in. It's nice talking with each of you and good luck in your work.
Well, thank you so much to Ruby Sales and the students for that wonderful conversation. Yes, as we used to say, right on. As you heard, several of the students highlighted the importance of gun control and the impact that gun violence has had on their lives. Let's hear a little bit more about the campaign to end gun violence from Everytown, an organization that has mobilized campuses through its program, Students Demand Action.
Am I mad? Yes. Will I cry? Absolutely. But will I stop?
When I started Moms Demand Action, I really did think very naively that we would pass federal level legislation within weeks or months. 10 years later, I understand that Congress isn't necessarily where this work begins, it's where it ends.
And that is thanks to the countless doors you've knocked, the calls you have made, and the days, the long days you have spent at state capitals.
We are assembling like generations before who took change to Washington and did not wait for it.
We have to change the culture, the attitude of how we think about this.
We will make history by making progress.
Continue to fight on the front lines. Continue to speak with your voices.
Enough is enough. Don't look away. Lead.
Don't look away. Don't look away. Don't look away.
I want us all to revel in that, to celebrate it, to enjoy that milestone, the fact that the logjam has been moved. but the work doesn't stop.
Young people have been the forefront of movements. We are the future. We're going to be the ones changing things, and we should not have to live through the trauma of gun violence.
We are ultimately the vessels by which you empower us. And so I am here to thank you. I am here to plead for your additional activism.
We have to keep doing this work until every life in America is safe from gun violence.
Why? Because we fight until we win.
And we will win.
Love that. We fight until we win. Across the country, students are organizing to end gun violence. And we are now joined by several Courage Fellows from Giffords, an organization dedicated to saving lives from gun violence, led by former Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords. 41,000 Americans die from gun violence every year. These young leaders are working to change that. Kate Moore is political director at Giffords, and she will talk with students from the University of Colorado and Howard University. Please welcome Kate Moore, Rachel Hill, and Xavier Copeland.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kate Moore. I'm the National Political Director here at Giffords, and I just wanted to extend a huge thank you to Roosevelt House for hosting this event and for inviting Giffords to participate. So every year, gun violence claims the lives of 45,000 Americans indiscriminately. For the past few election cycles, we've seen a shift in consciousness on this issue, and Democrats, independents, even a high number of Republicans are now demanding action to save lives from their elected officials. And this fall, gun safety is going to be a huge issue of great importance in the midterm elections up and down the ballot. And we believe that messaging on public safety will be critically important to holding the House and flipping crucial swing seats across the country. So our team at Giffords, we've been traveling the country, hosting events, talking to voters of all ages and backgrounds, from Miami, Florida to Seattle, Washington, everywhere in between. And across the country, we've seen that this issue is especially important for young people, which is why we launched the Giffords Courage Fellows program in 2018. Our Courage Fellows participate in advocacy training to build the next generation of leaders in the gun violence prevention movement. So I'm very honored today to be joined by Rachel Hill, a Courage Fellow from our 2022 class, who's a senior at the University of Colorado Boulder, as well as Xavier Copeland, a Courage Fellow from our 2020 class, who's a sophomore at Howard University in Washington, D.C. So Rachel and Xavier, thank you so much for being with us here today. And I want to turn it over to both of you to just briefly introduce yourself, tell us a little bit more about why gun safety motivates you and your own decisions at the ballot box this fall.
Thank you, Kate. Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel. I am a senior at CU Boulder. And a little bit about me. I've been in the gun violence prevention movement since I was 16 years old. So it's been about 5 years now. And I went to Columbine High School, and that's where I learned how devastating the impacts of gun violence can be. And even now, today in 2022, gun violence still affects the Columbine community because of what happened there in 1999. People seem to think that gun violence happens once and then we forget about it and it goes away, but it doesn't. And it's going to keep happening. When I was a sophomore at CU Boulder, the King Soopers shooting happened, and I was across the street getting gas when the shooter took 10 lives in my own community. So the only two communities that I've ever lived in have been touched by gun violence, and both communities still feel the devastating impacts. So that's why I'm a gun sense voter. And I've been voting since the 2018 election, and I'm glad to say that we've seen a lot of meaningful change since then. I remember the first time that I went to a gun violence prevention rally. It was March for Our Lives in 2018. And there was a big push in Colorado to get one of our senators out of office. His name was Cory Gardner, and he took a lot of money from the NRA. He didn't seem to care about the several shootings that had occurred in Colorado, the day-to-day gun violence that occurred all across the state, and he had an A+ rating from the NRA. And so our biggest push was to get him out of office, and we did it. And so one of the most meaningful things that I saw after that was gun violence still occurred because it's still going to occur. But at the second March for Our Lives rally earlier this year, there was someone holding a sign with Cory Gardner's face on it, and it said, "Your vote mattered." And that gave me some hope because our votes did matter, and our votes put someone in the Senate who was going to actually care about this issue and who was going to fight to make our lives safer. And he did it. He voted for gun violence prevention on the national level. And although there's still a lot of work to do, those kinds of things make a difference. And I hope that others, people around me, my peers, they understand that this issue is also really important. And so that's why us as the younger generation continue to vote for gun safety candidates, gun safety measures, because if we don't, it's going to keep happening.
So I started getting involved in the gun violence prevention movement because I saw that there was a lot of, at the time, school shootings and mass shootings going on. And me growing up in high school during 2018, 2019, that was a very big issue for me because I felt as though if we're not safe in our own schools, then where are we safe if that's supposed to be the number one place that we're supposed to be safe while we're getting our education? And then building out from that, I started getting involved in a lot of community violence and interpersonal violence with gun violence, seeing as to how communities really are where a lot of gun violence is happening. And we need to really address that and fix that because of the fact that it's been going on for so long without being addressed. And so growing up in Providence, Rhode Island, there was not a lot of gun violence, but when there was gun violence, it really had a very deep rooted effect on the community. And so for me, it was always what work can I do to make sure that that does not happen so that if there is another event like a shooting in my city, the entire community does not feel the entire effects. And so when I did end up graduating from high school and I did move to Washington, D.C., where there was a lot more gun violence happening, I knew that I did not want to come to a new city and just sit on my hands and not do anything. And I knew that if I was coming to Washington, D.C., I would want to be an active member in the gun violence prevention community because of how much it happens in D.C. And for me, it was always like, what can I do to give back to the community and make sure the community feels safe? Just being a Black person living in the United States and seeing how drastically gun violence affects the Black community, I knew that if I didn't help or if I didn't even at least try to talk to legislative officials or even push for policies or even go to rallies, I wasn't serving my community and it didn't feel right not serving my community, especially coming from a different place into another one and not trying to localize myself with what was going on and not trying to understand that in Washington, D.C., it's a special community. And so, and for you or someone to just come in and start doing things without connecting to the locals, it was not beneficial to anybody and it was not beneficial to me.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much for introducing yourselves and sharing your stories. Would love to hear from both of you about what advice you have for young people on engaging others in gun violence prevention work.
I would say initially just start small. I know we all want change on a national level. We need change on a national level, but sometimes we can make the most meaningful change on our local state levels. For me personally, right now on the University of Colorado campuses, guns are allowed. Someone can have a concealed weapon and they don't have to disclose it to anyone except for the university. The person next to you in class could have one. And so we're trying to change that on our campus level, and that's something that could save lives. So those changes do matter and those changes do save lives. And I would also say to people that this is a tough issue. From someone who's been here for 5 years, it gets hard sometimes. It's draining, it's depressing. And I would say to people, take time for yourself and take a break if you need to, because if you can't be in it 100%, then it's hard to make change. The issue, sadly, is going to be here for a long time. And so it's okay to step back and then give it your all by taking a break and going back into it. So making sure that you take time for yourself in this difficult movement is really important.
I 100% agree. I feel like as organizers and activists, we usually put a lot of other struggles before we put our own struggles. And so taking a break because this work can get very depressing, it can get very sad, and it can get very draining. Working on 0% is not effective for anybody. And at the end of the day, you're only hurting yourself. And so taking a break, whether it be a day or an hour or a couple minutes, is always beneficial. And prioritizing your own mental health and your own self health, because you are in this movement as well and you are being affected as well. And I would also say reach out to the communities and reach out into to grassroots organizations or even people that you know that are doing the work in their community, because there's a lot to learn. I do agree with Rachel that a lot of the times we try to push things on a national level, but when you really focus on your own state or your own community, there's a ton of work that can be done and a ton of progress that can be made, just because it's easier to get in contact with your local elected officials. It's easier to organize people in your communities or in your neighborhoods in order to mobilize against something or for something. And it's even good to just have background knowledge of what it is like to be a grassroots organizer. A lot of the work that I have done has been built off of the fact that I learned from grassroots organizers in my community. And I use those practices in my organizing and in the work that I do, and it's still 100% effective, whether it's on a local level or a statewide level or a national level. So always just going back to the community and seeing what work is being done, because you never know how helpful and influential it can be in your own work.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much and for this wonderful conversation. Know you both are in the midst of very busy fall semesters. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for all the work that you do in the gun violence prevention movement. As I mentioned at the beginning, both Rachel and Xavier are members of our Courage Fellows program. Would love if you can take a look at the link, share it with your networks if you think anyone might be interested in becoming a Courage Fellow either this year or in a future year. The application's open now on our website, giffords.org, and I believe will be thrown into the chat here too. So please take a look. We also have a lot of resources on our Giffords website about gun safety champions running up and down the ballot and ways to get involved this November, as well as just policy memos and other materials on gun violence prevention. So really hope you can take a look at it, and thank you all again for joining us today.
Thanks so much to Giffords for all of that sage advice. It's encouraging to hear the determination of these young voters to make the country safer, and I'm sure that their work is going to make it safer. So we thank them for their thoughts and also for their hard work. Reproductive freedom is another issue voters are very concerned about, and one that will dramatically affect their lives. Let's take a look at this video from NARAL Pro-Choice for more background on what exactly is happening.
Today, when you leave your home, take a look around you. And you'll see someone who just lost their reproductive freedom. That's because the Supreme Court's anti-choice supermajority just dismantled Roe v. Wade, ending Americans' constitutional right to an abortion. Millions will soon be left with no access to care, forced to travel hundreds of miles, or forced to continue a pregnancy against their will. And this seismic gutting of personal freedom is just part of a decades-long anti-choice campaign that won't end here. This year alone, states have introduced over 500 restrictions on abortion, and Texas and Oklahoma have already pushed abortion care out of reach for millions. Now that the Supreme Court has given the green light, 28 states will likely ban abortion outright, causing serious harm to millions more, especially those already marginalized. And there are already talks of a federal nationwide ban. But the vast majority of Americans, 8 in 10, support the legal right to an abortion. So when you take a look around, you'll also see who needs to come together now, because it's up to us to fight for our fundamental freedoms and send a clear message to anti-choice politicians. When you come for our rights, we will fight back.
And as mentioned in the video, 8 out of 10 Americans support abortion rights. This is an issue for men as well as for women. We know that there are many issues you all care about, and so many students are working hard across the country to get their campuses more engaged in the political process. Now we want to open up the floor and hear from you about what students are thinking about and doing to make sure that their campuses get involved and that everybody gets out to vote this year. I believe that we have in the room with us Durga, representing Duke University, Aria, Kentucky State University, Rebecca, a graduate of Smith College, Leal of Cornell University, James and others from Yale University, Amanda, Howard University, and Kylie from Hunter College, and I think Joseph and Kaya from Santa Clara University School of Law as well are all with us in the Zoom room. Thank you all so much for being with us. I do want to ask you what you are passionate about. If we could go around and if you could each tell us what is in your heart that you really are thinking about, and the reason that you're voting and that you're encouraging your fellow classmates to vote and the world, this entire country, to get going this way. Should we start with Durga from Duke?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, Rami, Katrina, and Ms. Jenkins. I really appreciate this opportunity. So I'm a student at Duke University, and I'm a sophomore here. What really gets me going, especially given recent months, is what's been going on regarding Roe v. Wade, particularly in North Carolina. So in my state specifically, you can only get an abortion if you have medical issues or if you have been raped. And that standard is really like beneath the floor. So it's been really disheartening to think about. There's been a lot of crying on campus, so that's definitely been like something that's on my mind. And we as students also, that has like been getting me like trying to get my friends to mobilize around voting, is that like we are the lowest. We as like 19 to around 29-year-olds are like the lowest, vote at the lowest rates. So we really have to change that. If we consider ourselves people who are super passionate about things like climate change and abortion and giving people freedom to live their lives properly, then we should like put our money where our mouth is and actually go out and like get out the vote. So that's what gets me going.
Durga, thank you so much. And I understand we've been joined by Maddie Guerra from the University of Pennsylvania. Thanks so much, Maddie, for being here and for all of the hard work I know you've been doing. Does anybody want to respond to Durga in terms of all of the things that she brought up: reproductive rights, climate change, health? There are all kinds of things that really, we need to be voting about. Anybody want to raise their hand to say, I want to jump in right now? James, are you there?
I am, yeah. Thanks so much for sharing. I'm thinking, Ms. Jenkins, about the importance of what universities can do to encourage students to get out to vote. The sponsoring of stamps for students to send absentee ballots in. The clearing of coursework due on election day or exams scheduled for election day. Things that universities that claim to be interested in support of student expression and liberalism and preservation of institutions, things that these universities can do to actually maximize and encourage their students' sort of civic participation. So that's what I'm thinking about today, and just so great to hear from everybody else and get a greater sense of and what's on all of our minds as we turn to this really crucial election.
James, thanks so much. And again, thanks for your hard work as well. We've been following you since you were a baby, in your activism. Rebecca, graduate of Smith College, still very much active in issues. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, I've got a lot on my mind, and thank you so much for having me today. One of the big things that I'm concerned about is the Equal Rights Amendment. This is something that I've thought a lot about. I did my senior capstone project on the Equal Rights Amendment when I was at Smith College, Basically, the Equal Rights Amendment, for those who aren't familiar, is an amendment to the Constitution that would protect gender equality, which right now we don't have in the Constitution. And I believe there's about 85% of UN member states around the world that do have gender protected in the Constitution. And so I'm thinking a lot about the Equal Rights Amendment and how, if that was added to the Constitution, we'd have greater protections for survivors and victims of domestic violence to be able to sue their attackers, greater access to laws on paid leave and things like that. And so it's a very wonky policy issue, but essentially right now it's sort of caught up in a lot of lawsuits, and the House passed a resolution to remove the deadline on the Equal Rights Amendment because there's some legal question about whether the deadline on the Equal Rights Amendment is binding. And it's now up to the Senate to do the same. And we have many senators right now who are not willing to break the filibuster. And so I'm thinking a lot about the Equal Rights Amendment and about Roe and about LGBTQ rights and all of the other amazing pieces of legislation that are out there that are not getting passed because of the filibuster. So I think we really got to focus our efforts on the Senate in that respect. And in terms of LGBTQ rights, that's something that's personal to me. I identify as queer. I have lots of trans and non-binary friends, and feel that their rights are really under attack right now. And so hoping to make some progress on that front as well.
Rebecca, thanks so much. And I'm delighted you know so much about the ERA, and are fighting for your other issues as well. That's encouraging to us who've been working for a century to get it passed. Amanda from Howard University, what's on your mind today?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
We saw you in the video with Ruby Sales, we believe, right? You were so wonderfully articulate about your concerns about your community and about gun violence, and also it's just an elaboration of that, of what you're passionate about and what you're thinking about in terms of the vote coming up on November 8th.
As you said before, I'm passionate about civic engagement. I'm passionate about serving others, and I'm passionate about my community. So I'm going to make sure that in this election, I use my vote to embody all of those passions and to make sure members of my community are served, and to make sure we get people in office that really care about us and are willing to make our voices heard and advocate for some of the issues that we're experiencing.
Great, thank you, and thanks for that great conversation with Ruby too. Aria from Kentucky State University, what are you passionate about and want your fellow voters to know about?
Hello, I'm Aria Miles. I have a lot, but my main big one is gun rights. I have a little sister who goes to a school, and she told me the other day how she was so scared to go to school because she's afraid of getting shot. And that, as a big sister, did not sit well with me. So I always told my friends, we need to go vote, get these politicians out who don't really care about gun rights. They don't really care until it's one of their kids. And then it's just kind of sickening how they don't want to do anything, and how all the Republicans basically voted no when it came to gun reform laws. Other than that, it is also police brutality. Like I said in the video, I live not that far from Louisville, so gun rights, police brutality is something kind of just big on my mind, just for that one reason, because it could be one of my friends, me, or one of my colleagues, like I said in the video, and that just makes me sit up all night because I just wonder, when is change going to happen? So.
Right. Are you feeling confident that this vote, that you will be able to encourage enough other students to get out to vote to make a change in that?
Yes, I'm an NAACP. We just had our voter registration day event. I think it was September 20th, and we got almost 40 people new registered to vote. So hopefully, and our work isn't done, but we're trying to continue that change on our campus for students to vote, or just change to the our local area to go vote. So I always encourage them to register to vote or get an absentee ballot. You know, your vote matter. Your voice should be heard no matter where you're at. So that's what I always
That's
tell them.
great. That is fantastic. 40 vote. That's a lot of votes. And remember, every vote, every single vote counts. Kylie from Hunter College.
Hi, thank you for having me. I think the thing that makes me most passionate, or just really keeps me up at night is just the overturning of Roe v. Wade. I'm currently doing an internship at Sanctuary for Families where we're dealing with victims of gender-based violence, domestic violence, and human trafficking. And I think knowing that not all of these victims are state natives of New York, they come from all over. And so knowing that they don't have access to these rights wherever they may be coming from is something that's super scary to me. And I think that it's our civic duty as young individuals and just people across the board. We need to vote and we need to protect not only the lives of these women, but everyone across the board, whether it be with gun rights and making sure that there's more safety rights being implemented, whether it be LGBTQ rights. I just think that there needs to be more activism at our level, just because we are the change that we want to see in the world and we are the generation at the forefront. So yeah.
Great, great. Thanks so much. Santa Clara School of Law. Is it Kaya that I'm looking at there? And Joseph is somewhere in the board as well. Joseph, if you could, because you're both in the School of Law and, you know, we assume are tackling specific subject areas that you're working on, what's on your minds today and what are you working on?
First of all, can you hear us all right? Well, can you hear us okay?
Joseph, could you hear the question, or Kaya?
Yeah, can you hear
us?
I guess I was losing some of the audio, but now we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Well, specifically to me, I work in the immigration field, and over the last few years, we've noticed a lot of negative attitude towards people across the world, especially the individuals who come to the United States looking for the chance at a successful, happy life, and especially the ones seeking asylum or any humanitarian like visa. I think what we need are politicians and people in our community who are going to treat those individuals with more respect, realize that we are a nation filled of immigrants, and we always will be, and that at the end of the day, we are all human beings who deserve respect and will always be given the chance to live happy, successful lives.
Right, and we know that there are specific votes that can be cast in this election that would cure some of that anti-immigration belief and actions. Kaya, are you working on immigration as well, or what else is on your plate?
I work in family law, and so it's been reiterated a couple times how important domestic violence prevention is. And actually our state updated our DV Act starting this year that included coercive control as a sign or not as a form of domestic violence. And I think that's really important, and it takes one more step further than just physical abuse. It also included mental abuse or stalking, harassment, things that are not usually taken as domestic violence or overlooked often. And I think that focusing on the smaller details that happen in everyday life when it comes to domestic violence takes it a step further in preventing it as a whole.
Excellent, excellent. Leal, your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And first, I just want to say it's so inspiring to hear from the other students and recent graduates on this call about, you know, your passions and the actions that you're taking. It's pretty amazing. So I'm Liel. I'm a recent graduate of Cornell University, and I spent the past year working at a nonprofit organization, working in the women's rights field, specifically in a legal context. And so I became very acutely aware of the impact of the Dobbs decision, which overturned Roe v. Wade, not just on abortion itself, but also how that will flow into educational rights of women, how it will flow into workplace rights of women. And it does make me passionate. It makes me irate, and it makes me, see the direct consequences of who we vote for, and the actions that they can or cannot take, especially now as we're waiting to see what the federal government is going to do, either to protect or not to protect abortion. So that is on the line, and that's what makes me want to vote and wants me to, get other young people out there to vote, is to hold their feet to the fire and make sure that the change that we need is coming. So thank you.
Terrific. Thanks so much. And Maddie, you can wrap this up today.
Hi, thank you. And thank you all for sharing your thoughts. It's been really inspiring. I'm a recent graduate from the University of Pennsylvania, and I currently work as a death penalty investigator and mitigation specialist based in Florida. So moving from one swing state to another, I think I see the importance of voting in everyday life. I mean, every day in Florida is basically a battleground for our human rights, whether it's gun control, reproductive freedom, immigration, like everything that everyone has touched on. But I want to touch on it, what I think Amanda and Aria brought up, which was looking out for our communities. And so my focus on this next election in Florida, especially in Florida, is helping those who are disenfranchised. So when I think of this, I think about the people I work with on a day-to-day basis. And obviously, depending on the state, many informally incarcerated and currently incarcerated folks don't have the ability to vote due to historic, really racist legislation that wants to suppress their vote. So they face many immense hurdles to restoring their voting rights, especially down here. It's focusing on supporting organizations that are helping pay the fines so that people can go and vote. It's something I'd say everyone should look into in their state and see if they can help others in their community access the right to vote. In Florida, if those people were able to vote here, our state representatives would look much different. And I think that that's going to be really critical down here in places like Florida, in places like Pennsylvania, that will start to really change what our representatives look like ultimately.
Great, great. And Rami, I see you sitting there, as an organizer of this entire event. Your thoughts, having heard what our students have said, what an array, of topics they have and projects that they're working on. I think you're on mute, Rami. What are you thinking now?
Yeah, no, I'm just amazed and really proud of everyone who has spoken. And as I said earlier, I think, sometimes when we have a lot of conversations in academia about privilege, and one way that I've seen it when it comes to, having been a recent student of public policy, is privilege is not having your life on the line when policy is being debated. And for so many people, our lives are on the line. I think my first personal experience with that was, growing up undocumented and having President Obama announce an executive order called Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, which completely changed the trajectory of my life. And when it comes to immigration reform, there's so much more that needs to be done. But we also know that one single policy can change an entire person's life. And I'm just really excited about all of the different policy areas that we're discussing here that are going to be changing people's lives for the better if we're mobilizing the vote in the way that we need to.
Well, great, great. And congratulations from just graduating from Harvard University. Talk about having the trajectory of a life change. Congratulations. And to all of our students, thank you so much for everything that you're working on. It gives all of us who've been doing this for a while so much hope and optimism that you will change things. So we're going to stick around for a while longer. And thank you all so much for your hard work and for being so smart about everything. For all of you out there who have heard all of the reasons that our students have given for getting out and voting this November 8th, if you still need more, we have 10 more reasons for you, outlined by Robin Morgan, the renowned activist, poet, writer, and author of Sisterhood is Powerful, an anthology published 50 years ago that changed the lives of many young women. I was one of them. No, I wasn't even young then. But Robin Morgan has changed a lot of lives. Let's listen to what she has to say.
Hi, I'm Robin Morgan, and I've written down here 10 reasons why you should register and vote. Well, okay, here we go. 1, it's a civic duty, patriotic, and principled, and all that stuff, so you get to feel virtuous. Well, that's so important. 2, you can either please or infuriate your parents by telling them or by refusing to tell them who you voted for. That's fun. 3, you get to say what you want, what you think for change. No parents, no teachers, nobody but you gets to say. It's a kind of heady feeling. You get drunk off it. 4, I know it sounds weird, but you get to feel like a citizen, because you are a responsible adult, grown-up citizen, an American citizen, voting. Wow. Well, 5, not to guilt you or anything, but people have literally died for your vote. They've been beaten up, they've been tortured, they've been killed, all because they just wanted to stand on line and cast their vote. In many places of the world, in this country, in some places even, they still are all those things. As I said, though, not to guilt you or anything. 5, 6, what are we? Oh yeah, I'm up to 6. Your body itself is on the ballot. This is a really big one. I mean, really. How and when you get your period is on the ballot. How and what sex you might have, and with whom, and when, and why, and how dare you. Abstinence only. What happens if you get pregnant and you don't want to be? What happens? All that is on the ballot, and more, people. So are you going to let old, white, straight, boring men tell you what to do with your body? I don't think so. What do you think? The insanity of that is reason enough to vote. I mean, I'll go on with my list in any event, but I'm just saying. 7, there's never been an election as critical as this one. I know they say that every year, but this time democracy itself is really on the ballot. And because there are power-mad imbeciles who want to recount everything, including their own fingers and toes, seriously, the right to vote itself is on the ballot, so you better vote for it before you can vote, if you know what I mean. Yeah, you better vote for it before you can vote. Okay, we're up to 8, getting there. Yeah, you get to save the world. It's no little thing, because thousands of species are dying every day, and there's earthquakes and forest fires and floods and typhoons and hurricanes and volcanoes all going off all over the place, and poor planet, we're having a harder and harder time even breathing or finding clean water to drink. Planet's in bad shape. And look, I'll be out of here pretty soon, but you won't. You're going to be around and watch this dystopia horribly bloom. So be actually clever about it, and don't let it become a dystopia, to save this little blue marble in vast space. It's really beautiful. The planet's on the ballot. 9, you get to lord it over your friends, and for that matter, over anybody who hasn't registered to vote or who hasn't voted. You can make their lives really miserable. Yeah, they won't admit it, but they will be wretched, which is great fun. You can point out their stupidity and their laziness, and you can parade your patriotic responsibilities that you have carried out with such brilliant dedication, or you can just be very subtle and snotty and, just mention it in passing. Oh, I voted yesterday. 10, it's really cool. Thanks for listening to this. 10 reasons.
Robin Morgan, thank you so much. Having had Robin as an editor, I will say you'd better get out and vote. At any rate, we want to say that we are also glad to have, in addition to Robin Morgan, giving us, in addition to having Robin Morgan giving us 10 reasons to vote, we have Supermajority as one of our partners. Amanda Brown-Learman is the executive director of Supermajority, which is reaching out to inform, train, and organize women across age, race, and background. You do know that women are the majority of the population. And Amanda is one of the youngest women and very few women of color to head a major progressive multiracial women's organization. And here is her inspiring message to you with a small partner.
Amanda here. I am the executive director of Supermajority, and this is my daughter, Heart. Supermajority is a women's equality organization made up of women of all backgrounds, races, and ages who are coming together to create a future where women are truly equal. We hold hope for a world where our lives are safe, our bodies are respected, our work is valued, our families are supported, and our government represents us. And it is with our voices and our votes that we can make that vision a reality. We know that young people, young women are literally our future. I got my start as a young person who thought I could change the world years and years ago. And I want every woman to be empowered with that same fire, that same determination, that same righteousness even. When I look at my own kids and when I talk to young women across the country, it's always this incredible reminder that we are going to be okay, because you have an incredible spirit and a strength that is truly unprecedented. Of course, as our abortion rights are under attack and being taken away in so many states, and as we see gun violence impact so many communities across the country, you're probably feeling some rage, some grief, some despair, and like nothing that you do matters. And trust me, I get it. But losing hope is literally what the opposition wants us to do. And change is possible. In fact, change and fighting for change is our very best form of resistance. When we work together, when we vote together, we can win a better future. And voting is truly a critical tool to help realize the vision that we have for a better future and to hold our leaders accountable. It's a way that we can flex our collective muscle and vote in leaders who are actually for us and vote out those who are not. So let this be a reminder that your vote is powerful, that your vote is vital, and that you, yes, you, have the power to change the direction of our country for the better. Thanks for giving me some hope too. Say bye.
That is so adorable. Thank you both so much for that encouragement. And now that you all have 10 and more, many, many, many more, as you heard from our students and from Robin and from Amanda and from the people at Giffords and Ruby Sales and the students, you know that this vote on November 8th is absolutely essential, and we have to do whatever we can to get everybody we know to the voting booth. We need you. And I want to thank all of you who have participated in this event, and we hope you will all help us get the word out. Social media, please spread this link. Please watch it and talk about all of the wonderful things you learned. And we want to leave you with a musical call from the fabulous rock feminist band Betty. It's called Rise, and let's all do that on November 8th. Thanks so much.
Up, get up, dance up, get up, sing up, get up, change everything. Up, get up, dance up, get up, sing up, get up, change everything. Silence must stop, violence must end, broken body and spirit will rise again. Strength in numbers, take a stand, right the wrongs, don't ask a man. If one woman hurts, if one woman cries, if one man bleeds, rise, rise. Up, get up, dance up, get up, sing up, get up, change everything. teeth, we're taking our place.